Hey, what's going on, guys? This Saturday is UFC 295, Jiri Procházka versus Alex Pereira for the vacant light heavyweight title. And even though this fight card has had some cancellations, some short notice fights, this is still a relatively stacked UFC pay-per-view. And I'm going to go through the pay-per-view main card, briefly discuss each fight, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to grade UFC 295 on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst pay-per-view ever, 10 being the greatest pay-per-view of all time, and I'm going to answer the question whether or not it is worth your money. Now, before I get into it, take a look at the full pay-per-view main card and comment down below what grade on a scale from 1 to 10 would you give UFC 295. Now, there are 3 factors I consider most important when breaking down and grading a UFC pay-per-view card. One being relevancy of the fight. Is it a championship fight? Is it a contender fight? 2, the skill level of the fighters. Are they bottom of the barrel fighters? Are they the elite of the elite, or are they mid-tier? And lastly, in the matchup, is it a stylistically fan-friendly fight? Now, those factors aren't in any particular order, but those are the 3 most important things to me when I look at a UFC pay-per-view card. Now, starting off with the first fight that opens up the main card, we have Matt Frevola versus Benoit Saint-Denis. This is an amazing lightweight fight. Both guys have looked incredible in their last few fights. You have Matt Frevola, who's on a 3-fight winning streak, all 3 fights won by stoppage. You have Saint-Denis on a 4-fight win streak, all 4 wins by stoppage. This is a banger fight. Matt Frevola is ranked. I'm not sure if Benoit Saint-Denis is currently ranked, but he's on the cusp of being ranked. Obviously, if he beats Matt Frevola, he will be. This is the fight that I'm most looking forward to on this card, or really close with number 1. All right, let's not get too carried away and get too hyperbolic. But this fight I'm really dying to see. And, you know, it's relevant to the division because both guys are either ranked or on the verge of ranked. I think Matt Frevola is still ranked like 14 or 15 right now. And Benoit Saint-Denis creeping up there and has been looking incredible. I mean, on paper, this is a fan-friendly matchup. It doesn't get more fan-friendly than Matt Frevola versus Benoit Saint-Denis. And both guys, while they're not proven to be the elite of the elite, they are both highly skilled fighters. So this fight really checks off all the boxes. I'm not sure if the original main event would have stayed intact. Would this fight have been still in the main card? I'm assuming it would have been, since Tom Aspinall, Sergey Pavlovich kind of replaced the main event and got swapped to the co-main. But this fight deserves to be on the main card. This is the perfect fight to open up UFC 295. Moving up on the card, we have Pat Sabatini versus Diego Lopez. This is a banger fight too, but does it deserve to be on the main card? I think it's a bit of a stretch to have this on the main card. Diego Lopez, you know, he's got a lot of hype from the loss to Movsar Evloev. And I've always said, no matter what fighter it is, we have to stop elevating guys off of losses. And I think too many people have gotten too carried away off a loss to Movsar Evloev. But that fight against Gavin Tucker absolutely wrecked him and submitted him in the first round. Pat Sabatini looked good in his last fight, but it was against Lucas Almeida, who's not all that great and not really, you know, barely his UFC caliber. And then the fight before that, lost to Damon Jackson. That's crazy. So this fight is kind of like a headliner for prelims, in my opinion. We don't know how good both guys are. They're very, very skilled, so there is that. But it's not super relevant to the division. I don't think a win here by either guy is going to get them ranked. Maybe it would. But I don't think it's the worst fight I'll have on the main card. I think it's a really solid fight. And stylistically, I mean, great matchmaking by the UFC. Basically, grappler versus grappler. You have Diego Lopez with crazy submission skills, crazy BJJ. But Pat Sabatini, I mean, unreal BJJ and submission skills as well. The majority of his fights, I can't remember how many it was. It was something like 10 out of 18 via submission. Diego Lopez won the majority of his fights by submission as well. So I'm very curious to see how this fight plays out on the ground. And I think it's a very fan-friendly matchup. And I'm really looking forward to it, but I feel like it should be like headlining the prelims. But that's a minor complaint. I really think this is a really solid fight. Moving up the card to the featured fight on the main card, and that's Jessica Andrade versus Mackenzie Dern. Why is this here? Why is this here? Why is this here? It's just, and by the way, I'm a little bit sick, guys, so if my voice is cutting out, I'm sorry about that. This is a horrible, horrible featured fight on the main card. I hope this gets shuffled around. You have Jessica Andrade. She might as well change her nickname to just showing up for a paycheck. That's literally should be her new nickname because she is literally just showing up for a paycheck. She's on a 3-fight losing streak. She's been stopped in her last 3 fights. Tatiana Suarez, Yan Xiaonan, Erin Blanchfield. Not horrible competition to lose to, but I think she's just showing up for a check. At one point, Jessica Andrade, I would have picked her to demolish Mackenzie Dern. Now I couldn't pick her to save my life. No way, no how. She's just, she's showing up for a check. Mackenzie Dern's a good fighter. She has decent jiu-jitsu, or really good jiu-jitsu, really good submission game. I don't know why I said decent there. But main card worthy, main card pay-per-view worthy. She didn't deserve to be in an Apex main event, let alone on a massive Madison Square Garden pay-per-view card. Imagine you bought tickets for like 10 grand. You got Mackenzie Dern, Jessica Andrade on the main card. And what's sad is there's not really anything to replace it with. There's not something you could take off the prelims and put it on the main card because the prelims aren't crazy stacked by any means. But this should like open up the main card, to be quite honest. This is going to be like a shit sandwich in between a bunch of great matchups. Don't care for the fight that much. It is technically 2 high-level fighters. It is technically relevant to the division because I think the UFC is trying to push Mackenzie Dern towards a title shot. But at the end of the day, I'm not looking forward to seeing somebody like Jessica Andrade just show up for a paycheck. That is not what I'm interested in, and I feel like that's all she does. So this fight on the main card, absolutely hate it. It's a stylistically fan-friendly matchup, though. You have Jessica Andrade, who likes to plot forward, throw big shots. Mackenzie Dern looking for hip tosses, looking for takedowns to impose her jiu-jitsu and look for submissions. But at the end of the day, I just can't get over the fact that Jessica Andrade is looking for a payday. And, I'm just tired of seeing her show up and lose and get stopped in every fight. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall for the interim heavyweight title. It doesn't get much more notable to the division than an interim heavyweight title, other than the undisputed title. So this is a massive fight in the division, and it's 2 top 5 guys. And I'm really looking forward to this matchup, but I hate that Tom Aspinall is coming in on short notice. Sergey Pavlovich was training as the backup for John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. So Pavlovich has a full training camp, and I hate the fact that they didn't have this fight already booked, and then when Jones and Stipe got canceled, they could have just elevated this to an interim heavyweight title fight. So I'm a little bit disappointed that Tom Aspinall doesn't get a full camp. I feel like there's going to be a bunch of excuses if he does lose. But at the end of the day, this is a banger heavyweight matchup. Sergey Pavlovich on a crazy winning streak, all by first-round KO. Tom Aspinall coming off that pretty impressive performance against Marcin Tybura. But it was Marcin Tybura. And this, honestly, is one of those matchups that it's like we're finally getting a good heavyweight matchup. Tom Aspinall has a lot of hype behind him. It's crazy. I know he lost 2 fights ago, but it was a kind of a freak injury against Curtis Blades. We didn't really get to see the fight play out. They wheeled him out in the world's smallest chair after he tore his ACL, but he returned. He kind of had a tune-up fight against Marcin Tybura, and now he's taking on Sergey Pavlovich. What a banger matchup this is, and this is kind of grappler versus striker. Not that Aspinall doesn't have striking, but if he's smart, he's going to come in and shoot on takedowns against Sergey Pavlovich. So this is a fan-friendly matchup. Both guys are super high level, especially for the heavyweight division. Tom Aspinall, talk about a new breed of heavyweight. People kind of hype him up as that. Great footwork, very fast, athletic. Sergey Pavlovich, not as athletic, not as fast, but unbelievable hands, unbelievable power and finishing ability. So on paper, stylistically, this is a fan-friendly matchup. I'm really looking forward to it. It doesn't get much more important in the division. I wish it was for the undisputed belt because honestly, if Jones is going to be out a year basically, and he's going to return against Stipe, let them fight without the belt on the line. This should be for the undisputed title, especially if the winner's not fighting John Jones. The only complaint I can make about this fight is the one I've already said. I don't like that Tom Aspinall is stepping in on 3 weeks' notice in a 5-round interim heavyweight title fight. So that's really the only complaint I have about that fight. But other than that, it's an absolute banger of a heavyweight matchup. Moving on to the main event, we have Jiri Procházka versus Alex Pereira. Honestly, when this event was originally announced, this was the co-main event because you had John Jones versus Stipe Miocic as the main event. Jiri Procházka versus Alex Pereira was the people's main event originally. I am so excited to see Jiri Procházka back in the cage. He's been out for roughly a year and a half. He got injured. He injured his shoulder. We never got the Glover Teixeira rematch. And, the light heavyweight division's kind of been in shambles. In December, you had a draw for the vacant belt. Then in January, Jamal Hill beat Glover Teixeira to win the belt. Then Jamal Hill tore his Achilles. We thought we were going to get Procházka versus Hill. Now we're getting Procházka versus Pereira. But this is a matchup that a lot of us have kind of wanted for a while, kind of been fantasizing about. We never thought we would get it this soon. And I love this fight. It doesn't get much higher stakes, honestly. You have returning champion Jiri Procházka, returning former champion now because he vacated his belt due to an injury. And he's a wild man, a crazy striker, moves forward with reckless abandon. And he's fighting Alex Pereira, who's a technical savage and has nasty power in his left hand. This fight is so compelling, and it's like, who's going to get stopped? I mean, this doesn't get much more of a fan-friendly matchup than Jiri Procházka versus Alex Pereira because Pereira is so aesthetically pleasing to watch, but Jiri Procházka goes out there and just looks to cause chaos. He's going to be moving forward, swinging wildly, variety of attacks, and Pereira's going to be looking to counter. And, you know, this fight could go down. Either guy could get stopped, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this fight plays out. And I think it's a banger main event, and it doesn't get much higher than the undisputed light heavyweight title. You know, the division, again, has been kind of in shambles since John Jones left. And it's like going to be great that we're hopefully finally going to get a champion that hopefully stays active afterwards, you know. We kind of see it time and time again. Again, Jiri wins, then tears his shoulder up. Now he's been out for a year and a half. Jamal Hill, or then we have Magomedov versus Blachowicz, ends in a draw. Then we have Hill win and tear his Achilles. So I'm hoping whoever wins this fight stays relatively active, but I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. Jiri Procházka versus Alex Pereira is a hardcore fight fan's dream because stylistically, I mean, most would agree with me, but this is my opinion. I love the clash of styles here. The way you have Pereira just looking to counter and look to land big shots and KO you, has nasty leg kicks, nasty kicks in general. And then you have Procházka. I mean, doesn't he get any more exciting than Jiri Procházka? I mean, seriously. His last fight against Glover Teixeira may have been the best fight I've ever seen. Fight before that took the soul of Dominic Reyes, flatlined him with a spinning elbow. Fight before that, Volkan Ozdemir slept him. What's crazy, this is Jiri Procházka's fourth fight in the UFC. And think about the level of hype for Jiri Procházka returning. And then Alex Pereira looking to become a two-division champion. You're not simultaneous, but he was the middleweight champion, got flatlined by Israel Adesanya, moved up, took on former champion Jan Blachowicz, beat Jan Blachowicz by the skin of his teeth, and now he's thrust into a title shot that we didn't think he was going to get in 2023. We thought Jamal Hill, Jiri Procházka would fight each other, and then maybe Alex Pereira be next in line and maybe have to fight in between there. So we kind of got that fast track at middleweight. Pereira got the fast track at light heavyweight as well. And I just think this main event, I love it much more than I like John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. And honestly, that this main event makes the pay-per-view. Now, in terms of a grade for UFC 295, there's a couple things that just stop me from giving this an amazing grade. And I've already kind of talked about them. I hate that Tom Aspinall is coming in on short notice for this fight. That takes a little bit away from this event, in my opinion, because there's always that kind of asterisk next to it. I talked about it with Usman stepping in against Chimaev. You know, I talked about it with Volkanovski stepping in against Makhachev. There's always kind of an asterisk next to those short notice replacement opponents. And it's for both guys. If Pavlovich goes out there and knocks out Aspinall, it's like, oh, well, Aspinall only came in on short notice. So I kind of hate that. It takes a little bit away from the event. And then the real thing that really takes away from this pay-per-view is Jessica Andrade versus Mackenzie Dern. Featured fight on the main card. At least make it open up the card. You know, we get two banger matchups to open up the card. And then we just jump into Jessica Andrade, Mackenzie Dern. I think it's horrible bout ordering. You know, I talked about this for UFC Brazil. Horrible bout order for UFC Brazil. So I have to almost take a point for Jessica Andrade, Mackenzie Dern just being on the main card. The UFC should have found one more notable fight to throw on UFC 295 and then just demote this to the prelims as fast as humanly possible. So I have to take a little bit away for that. Outside of that, it's a really solid card, you know. Again, I think Pat Sabatini, Diego Lopez is more of like a prelim headliner, but that's splitting hairs. I'm really kind of picking apart the card here. So for my official grade for UFC 295, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. And I think this card, the top two fights just make this card entirely. Outside of that, it's not like the rest of the fights on the card are like crazy must see. You know, it's not one of these, you know, crazy stacked fight cards with 3 title fights and then 2 super notable fights below that, like a card like UFC 280 or even 294 was super notable in terms of like title contention fights. the first two fights are very fun. They're not title contention fights, you know? And again, I'm splitting hairs here, but I'm just giving my opinion on why I'm giving it a 7. And then really, if Andrade Dern was replaced with a little bit better fight than that as the feature fight on the card, I probably would have gave it like an 8, maybe a 7.5. But just with that being the feature fight and Tom Aspinall coming in on short notice, I have to give it a 7 out of 10. But overall, I think it's worth your money. I mean, if you like Jiri Procházka, if you've seen Jiri Procházka fight before, just the main event alone is worth the cost of the $85 ESPN Plus pay-per-view. And then on top of that, Pavlovich versus Aspinall. I know Aspinall's on short notice, but still a banger. Diego Lopez definitely is going to give you your money's worth. And then also, Matt Frevola versus Benoit Saint-Denis has fight of the year potential. So you have that fight of the year potential. I think Jiri Procházka versus Alex Pereira could be fight of the year potential. 2 title fights, 2 very meaningful fights. So I think UFC 295 is definitely worth ordering, but I would give it a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think of my grade down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.